Hi everyone. So today I wanted to do something a bit different. I want to talk about books that I've read in 2021. I've been wanting to talk about books to someone, and sure, I have a couple of people in my life that I can discuss some books with, but no one that I can really talk about all of the books that I've read this year, last year too. So I just decided to film a video about it, and then maybe it will be interesting to someone. It's a long shot, but we'll see. So I'm gonna try to go in chronological order and try to talk about the books in the order in which I read them. And also, I usually either read ebooks or listen to audiobooks, so a lot of these books I don't even own a physical copy of. So I'm gonna try to put a picture of whatever book I'm talking about. Yeah, let's get started. So the first book I read in 2021 was Galapagos. I hope I'm saying that right. Galapagos by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. And this book was genius on so many levels. Okay, so this is the first book I've read by Kurt Vonnegut Jr. and obviously I want to read his other works like The Slaughterhouse-Five and all that. I hadn't even heard about this book of his until my husband recommended it to me because he was reading it and loving it. So basically what it is post-apocalyptic fiction. Literally everyone is wiped off of the face of the earth except for a few people in the islands of Galapagos. So it follows their journey on trying to create a new civilization. And first of all, it was genius in that I learned so much about how evolution works. And secondly, it was hilarious. Like, this book had me laughing out loud. And it was so interesting to me how an author could make a book intelligent and hilarious at the same time. So I would really recommend this book if you're one, into post-apocalyptic fiction, and two, if you're looking to broaden your knowledge on evolution. So yeah, this was an easy 5-star review for me, and I think I'm going to reread it sometime in the future as well. So the second book I read in 2021 was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And this book was all over the place during the first part of the year. I'm pretty sure everyone knows about this book, even if you're not a reader. So the concept seemed a bit appealing to me, that's why I picked it up. Basically what happens here, by the way, trigger warning for suicide. We don't get too much into it, it doesn't get too graphic, but it is discussed. It is how the book starts, basically. So yeah, this main character called Nora decides to commit suicide, and when she does, she ends up in this kind of in-between place between life and death. From what I understand, it's kind of like if you're in a coma or you're having like a near-death experience, something like that. She's basically like in this in-between place, which is a library, and she can pick out any book off of the shelves and it will have the story of what would happen if she had made a different choice in her life. So basically she didn't get married to one guy and she can pick out a book that tells her what would happen if she did marry him, you know, stuff like that. And this is a person that has a lot of regrets in her life, so whatever she regrets, she can pick out a book according to that regret and see what would happen if she had made a different choice. And of course, we see that everything has worked out just perfectly for her and she needn't have the regrets that she has, and everything is just perfect the way it is, and you can't know what would have happened if you had made a different choice. It would probably be something worse. I guess the concept is good, but the execution, not so much. I gave it a 3-star review and I was being generous. I think it deserves more like 2.5. Yeah, it was just dry and was really simple writing. I really like the writing in a book to be a bit more complicated, not in the sense that to use like big SAT words or stuff like that, but just in the sense that, you know, you're writing a book, you're doing something different than when other people are speaking. You know, writing is so different from me than speaking. And you have the potential to make it so special and so touching. And this book just wasn't that for me. But I support the message. It's a good message to not have regrets. But I wouldn't really recommend it to anyone, really. Next. Okay, the next book that I read, oh my god, I still can't get over it. It was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt. It was that good. Donna Tartt is a genius. I don't care what anyone says. She is a genius. She only has 3 novels out, and I've read 2 of them. I've obviously read The Secret History, and I've read The Goldfinch. I haven't read The Little Friend. I kind of don't even want to because I don't want to run out of her works. But oh my god, this book. It was such a roller coaster of emotions, such a roller coaster of plot. It was such a plot heavy, character driven, such adventurous and developing story. I cannot say enough good things about it, truly. I felt like I grew with the book. It's pretty long, it's like 700 something pages, like almost 800 pages, and I read it over quite a long period of time. This was a time where I wasn't super into reading. It was like a slump for me. I usually get into reading more during fall and winter. This was March, I think, March and April or something. Yeah, it was just a lot. It was really a lot, and I don't think I would ever be able to binge it and read it in a couple or 3 or 4 days back to back, but I definitely 100% will be rereading it at least a couple times during the near future. I just realized I didn't say what it's about. So basically the book starts out with this kid and his mom in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in Manhattan, and there's a terror attack. This kid's mom dies in the terror attack. And the story is about him growing up without her. It stretches out over quite a long period of time. He's, I think, maybe 11 or 10 or something when this happens. It goes out into his like late 20s, if I'm not mistaken. After his mom is killed in the terror attack, he is also thrown out somewhere, and he ends up next to this picture of a goldfinch, and he feels this kind of connection to it, and he just takes the painting. And he's a kid, he doesn't know it's illegal or it's a crime to steal a piece of painting, so he basically steals the painting. And the story is about his journey and how he grows up, the people he meets, what happens to him along the way, when he falls in love. It's just such a great story, and I cannot wait to reread it. It's just, it blew my mind, really. There are so many twists. You're gonna love it. You are gonna love it. This was obviously another 5-star review. I think I would have given it 10 stars if I could. I just realized that I missed one book. So after the first book that I read, which was Galapagos, the second book that I read was actually And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And this is one that I actually own a physical copy of, but I wish I didn't. I truly wish I didn't. This is such garbage. This is not worth the paper that it was printed on. I know people love Agatha Christie. I myself am a mystery fan. I love thrillers. I love murder mysteries. This is not it. I have no idea why people call her the mystery queen. It's just, I was so mad when I finished this book. This was a 1-star review for me. It's just, I was waiting and waiting and waiting for the perfect twist, and then nothing happened. Literally nothing happened. Nada. It's basically about 10 people who receive letters from different people that they are invited to this island off the coast of England somewhere. I don't even remember where exactly. And all of them go for some reason, even though they don't know the person that invites them. They go and they're murdered one by one. We literally don't even find out who it is that murdered them. I mean, I remember there was kind of a reveal at the end, but I didn't care for it. This is pure garbage. Next. Okay, the next book was a reread for me, which is We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I used to have a physical copy of this book because it's one of my favorite books of all time. But then someone borrowed it and never gave it back. So now I have to put up a picture of it on the screen. No, I'm not bitter. I'm sure a lot of people know about We Were Liars. It's a young adult book and it's about this girl who belongs to this family that is very rich, and they have this private island that they go to every summer. And her and her cousins always have a great time during the summers on this island off the coast of Massachusetts, I think. And one year something happens and she loses some of her memory of one summer. It's told to us that she has had an accident and that's why some of her memory is wiped out, and she is in recovery and she has these horrible migraines and she has these horrible blackouts. Apparently her mother has told her what happened during that summer when she had the accident because she keeps asking her, but every time her mom tells her, after a couple of minutes she forgets. So we follow her going back after a couple of years to this island and trying to figure out what happened and how everything went down. And we're finding everything out with the main character. It's such beautiful writing. E. Lockhart wrote this book with kind of like, I think they're called line breaks. When you have like one sentence but you don't write it as a prose but kind of as a poem, like verse. And it makes so much sense because our main character's memory is filled with breaks and she has these like bits and pieces that she doesn't remember. And yeah, it's just, the first time I read it was in 2014 and I must have been 17 or something when I read it. I actually really read it in one sitting that time, the first time, because I was so hooked to the story and the writing stole my heart. There's a good twist at the end I didn't see coming, so that's good. So yeah, I really recommend this book and it was an easy 5 stars for me. The next book I read, or rather finished, because I had started it in 2020 and I finished it in 2021. It's called, I think the English title is Zero Limits by Joe Vitale, but I listened to it in Russian because I think I found the audiobook on YouTube like for free in Russian, and it's called Жизнь без ограничений in Russian. It's nonfiction and it's about this Hawaiian method of healing, like spiritual healing, that is called Ho'oponopono. I mean, it was really interesting to learn about this method and how healers have used it for generations, but it was kind of repetitive, like a lot of nonfiction like this is, like the self-help books. I really cannot stand I really cannot stand self-help books. Like, really, it's not my jam. I don't even like nonfiction in general usually, and especially self-help books. It's just not really what I do. One of the only self-help books that I've truly loved and have found value in was Atomic Habits by James Clear. You know, self-help books usually introduce you to an idea and then hash it out for like 300 pages, but Atomic Habits really had loads of knowledge, loads of information that you can apply to your life, and it gives you actionable steps that you can implement in your life. So I would recommend Atomic Habits to everyone that wants to boost productivity, but Zero Limits, not for everyone. The next 2 books are also rereads for me. It was a big year of rereads for me. So the first one is The Secret History. This is one of my favorite books of all time. It's my top 3 for sure. It's by Donna Tartt, the queen herself. The first time I read this book was in 2020. I think it was October or September of 2020. And I had been wanting to reread this book since like April of 2021. Literally 5 months later, I was like, I need that book again. And I actually listened to the audiobook on Audible, and it's narrated by Donna herself. She is such a good narrator for this book. It's just mwah, chef's kiss. And yeah, I had been wanting to reread it for a long time, but I wanted to wait for fall so that I get in the mood for the Dark Academia. And I reread it, and it was so wonderful. I don't own a physical copy of it, unfortunately, but I've been wanting to get one for the longest time so that I can actually annotate it and highlight it, just write all over it. I've never had this immense wish to own a physical book so that I can write on it. I'm usually like so careful. I use bookmarks. I never do the dog ears, or I never tear anything. I'm very careful with the spine. Like, I've read this book, but the spine looks so new, you know? I'm usually very careful with my books, even though they're garbage sometimes. But I really want to devour this book again and again, because I feel like every time I read it, I can get something new out of it. So what it is a story about a group of students in Vermont in this secluded college, and they all have this Greek class together. None of them is very likable, and that's what gets me every time. I'm like, none of these characters are very likable at all. Like, I don't think, not even just the cast of main characters, but also everyone else, they have like their own problems, they have their own flaws. Especially the group of main characters, they are severely flawed. But Donna Tartt has this talent of making you love them even though you hate them, okay? They're not likable people, but you still root for them. You still want to know their thought process and how they decide to do things, and they're so elitist and snobby. There's such a disconnect. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I love about this book, is that there's such a disconnect between this group of people and the outside world. There's even this one scene where we find out that one of the main characters doesn't know that there was a moon landing. It's just funny that, you know, everyone knows that there was a moon landing. There were people that landed on the moon, but this character doesn't, because he's so like in his world and in his books all the time. From the first sentence, you know that there's a murder, and you just find out what happened and what led up to it. We know that one of the main cast is murdered by all the rest. Everyone knows The Secret History is the poster child for Dark Academia. Also, I have this pet peeve of when people say Dark Academia instead of academia, because it's not a nut. It's not macadamia. It's academia. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to reread this book again and again and again and again until I die. Obviously, it was a 5-star for me. The next reread that I had was Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. The first time I read this was a long time ago. I think I must have been 14 or something, so that makes it a decade. The first time I gave it a 5 stars because that was just around the time that I even got into reading, so I didn't really have a lot to compare it to. And I still enjoyed it. It was really, really funny and enjoyable, but it was just not extraordinary for me anymore. So I changed my rating to 4 stars instead of 5 stars. And I think a lot of people know what this is about. It's just about this family that has 5 daughters, I think. and they're in courting season and they're trying to find husbands. Jane Austen has this quality in her writing that mocks a concept, but in a polite way. It's so English. I quite enjoyed it, but yeah, it was just nothing over the top for me. The next book I read was Bunny by Mona Awad. The reason I read this book was that I was trying to find other dark academia books that were similar to The Secret History. And that was my bad, because nothing can ever top The Secret History. I learned that the hard way. This book is just, it was just so weird. It was so strange. It's basically about this writing class that a bunch of girls have in a college. They have this kind of like a secret society thing, and it gets real weird real fast, and sometimes you don't even know if you can believe what you're reading or if it was just a hallucination or if people are imagining it. It's just, it was really gruesome as well, like unnecessarily so. I didn't like it at all. It was a 2 stars for me, and I wish I hadn't read it. Next, I read Foe by Ian Reid. And I had read I'm Thinking of Ending Things in 2020 and loved it. I listened to it on audiobook actually, and I would recommend getting the audiobook instead of reading the book, because I think it was much more effective in audio version. I loved it in 2020, so I was just planning to read more of his work, and I read Foe. It was actually pretty good. It was a 4 stars for me because I wasn't blown away by it, and it wasn't something that I really want to reread, but it was still a great novel. It had a great twist. It's basically about this couple who live very, very far away from the city. They're very secluded. And one night they see the stranger who pulls up in their driveway, and he's like, "You have been selected to go to space in like a few years," and he's just talking to the husband. They're trying to figure out why this happened to them, and you follow their journey throughout a couple of years when he's being prepared to go, and there's this whole discussion of what will happen if something goes wrong, or what will the wife be doing. And it's quite strange, which I liked. It had quite a creepy quality to it, which made it a great thriller. And I read it right around fall season, and yeah, I really enjoyed it, and it was quite fun. I gave it 4 stars just because it wasn't anything mind-blowing to me, but I do recommend it if you're interested in thrillers. Next, I listened to the audiobook of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I loved it. I had been seeing this book all over BookTube and just the recommendations, and it sounded interesting, but I think the title is a bit misleading. It's obviously The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and it's like, it's not just about the husbands, you know? So basically it's about this fictional Hollywood actress who is in her 70s, and she employs a journalist to write a biography for her, and she starts telling the story of her life from the start, and she mainly focuses on her career, but she also tells a story of what personal things she's been through throughout her career. And it's one of the main focuses of her life, that everyone's talking about how many times she's been married and no one thinks she has like real feelings, but she explains all of her marriages and how they came about. And it's really interesting, and there is a twist at the end which I didn't see coming. I wasn't even expecting a twist. It was just an interesting story that I was listening to, and I would have been fine without the twist as well, but it sure did add a lot to the storyline. And yeah, the plot was great. I think Taylor Jenkins Reid is a good writer. This is her first and only work that I've read, but I'm planning on reading more of her stuff this year in 2022. So yeah, it was a great read, and I recommend it to people who maybe have like a guilty pleasure for celebrity culture, which I don't even have that, but it was still interesting to me too. So Yeah, if you're just interested in the life of fictional Hollywood actress, then I would definitely recommend it. It's really well written and it was a 5-star review from me. The book I read after that is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and this is also the first and only book that I've read from her. I really quite enjoyed it, mainly because it was a very different style of writing than what I've read before. It's about these two people, Marianne and Connell. It starts when they're in high school and it goes on until they're in university, and it's just about their relationship as they grow apart, as they come back together. It's just about being young and in your late teens and early 20s and how you're trying to figure out the world. And yeah, it was quite fun. I know a lot of people like really love this book and some people really hate it, but for me it was kind of liking it very much. I gave it 4 stars. And yeah, I'm interested in her other work and I will probably be reading them this year. Mainly, I would like to read Beautiful World, Where Are You?, her latest book. I would recommend it to people who like contemporary fiction and just the lives of normal young adults. So yeah, it was a great read. The next book that I read is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. It was really, really fun. It was really fun. It was such an adventurous, fun read. Basically, in this world, which is in 2045, I think, 2045, there is this online platform called the Oasis, and it's a virtual world where you can do anything. People go to school there, people go to work there, you choose your avatar, and that's how people know you. Usually they don't even know your real name. They don't know what you look like. You can basically choose any avatar you want. And the storyline is that the creator of the Oasis has no one that he wants to leave his fortune to, and when he dies this video pops up of him and he's saying that he has planted some Easter eggs inside the Oasis, and whoever finds them will win all of his fortune. So our main character goes on this quest. He's trying to figure out where the Easter eggs are. It's about the people he meets along the way, and they're all trying to figure this out. And it's really, really fun, friendly. Yeah, I would recommend it to people who like fantasy slash dystopian slash sci-fi. But it wasn't really heavy in those aspects. It doesn't sound unbelievable at all, and I actually think that this is the story that is most likely to happen in real life. That we have this online platform that everyone does everything in, and that we don't even leave our houses anymore in 20 to 25 years. So yeah, it was quite interesting and I recommend it. It was a 5-star review for me. But I haven't heard any good things about the second book. It's called Ready Player 2, and no one that has read it that I've seen has recommended it, so I'm just not planning to read it. I think I'm done with the first book. The next book I read was The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This is another dark academia book that is recommended to people who like The Secret History, and I enjoyed it, but again, nothing tops The Secret History for me. It's about this woman who graduated from Cambridge and her niece is studying there at the moment, and her niece's friend is murdered. So she goes back to Cambridge and tries to figure out what happened to her niece's best friend. It involves a murder, it involves a secret society, it involves an academic environment, which are basically the main 3 things that you need for a dark academia concoction. So it does have all of those things. It's just that it wasn't as complicated. It was quite simple, but I didn't see the twist coming. Like, I was waiting for the twist and I was like, I have this figured out. I know what's gonna happen. I know what the twist is going to be. And I was like, what just happened? I didn't see that coming at all. So if anything, I would just recommend it for the twist. Like, if you're into twists like I am, it was really unexpected for me. I gave it 4 stars. The next book I read was Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. And I might be thinking, didn't you just bash the other book by Agatha Christie? Yes, I did, and I stand by that. But I wanted to give the woman another chance. I'm kind of glad I did. Murder on the Orient Express is her most famous work, and I can see why, because it was much better than this garbage, and then there were none. Yeah, it's about 12 people who are on the same train, and one of them gets murdered, and Hercule Poirot tries to decipher what happened, and I really enjoyed the reveal at the end. Not so much the story while it was going on, but mainly the ending. I thought the ending was quite interesting, but I wouldn't recommend it necessarily. I still gave it 4 stars, which is great for me, but it's just I don't really see myself reading more Agatha Christie, because if this was her most favored book, I can't really see how I would like others more. I think I'm done with Agatha. The next book I read was a graphic novel, and it is the graphic novel version of The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. It's this one. And this was kind of a reread for me because I've read The Alchemist a long time ago. I think I reread it a couple times when I was in school, and it used to be one of my favorite books. I think it still is one of my favorite books of all time. Hold on, I want to sneeze. Oh, that was brutal. Yeah, and I acquired this edition from one of our family friends. They were moving away and they had a bunch of books that they had their friends select from. And this is one that I chose. Thank you, the Apaydens. And I really liked the art style. And I thought that it was very, very accurate to the story. And I liked the characters and how they were portrayed. I also read Paulo Coelho's introduction, I think it was, where he said he was really pleased with the art style and the illustrations. And I can see why. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, a lot of people know the storyline. It was a 5-star review. I already know it's one of my favorites, and I really liked and really enjoyed the graphic novel aspect of it. We follow our main character called Santiago, and he is a shepherd in Spain. And the reason he's a shepherd is that he likes traveling. And one night he has a dream that there's a treasure near the pyramids in the desert, and he has this dream over and over again, and he just decides to go and see for himself. And it's a really cute spiritual journey. I think this is a great book to give teenagers. I don't know how older people would react to it if they were reading it for the first time, but it was a really, really revolutionary read for me when I read it for the first time. I think when I was 15 or 14. Highly recommend it to anyone who has kids that are teenagers. The next book I read was The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. And I had already read her other most famous book called Milk and Honey a few years ago when I was in university. It's a poetry collection, and I quite like her style of poetry. But the thing is, she has some poems, I don't even know if you can call them poems, that are just one line or one sentence. I don't quite get it, but I don't get a lot of poetry. I'm not particularly interested in poetry. I much prefer prose. But since I had already read Milk and Honey and enjoyed it, I thought maybe I could read this one too. And I did enjoy this one as well. It was a 4-star review for me, but again, it wasn't very revolutionary, but she did get quite vulnerable, especially towards the middle of the book. And it was really quite intense at some points. You should probably check out trigger warnings before you read this book, but I'm glad I read it. You know, I'm always trying to get more into poetry, but it's not really my thing. The next book I read, actually I listened to this on audio on YouTube. I think there's a free audiobook there. It's called The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. This is also the first and only work of his that I've read. I just didn't enjoy it. I don't know how to describe it. Basically, this man wakes up and he's like, oh, okay, I gotta get up and get ready and go to work. And then he's like, oh shit, I'm a bug. Yeah, I'm not kidding. And he realizes he has transformed into a giant bug, and he's trying to figure out how to move, how to roll over. He's trying to figure out what he's gonna tell his boss because he can't get up and get ready and go to work as a giant bug. And we just follow the story of how his family gets adjusted to it, and it's just so strange, not in a good way. The whole reason I read this was because I remembered that my now husband, who used to be my boyfriend, told me that this was one of his favorite books and that he thought it was genius. That happened when we first started dating, like 1 month or something. And I still remembered it, and I was like, oh, he really liked that book, I should read it. I was like, what the hell is this? I gave it 2 stars, and as soon as I finished it, I come up to him and I'm like, do you remember you told me once that The Metamorphosis was one of your favorite books ever? And he's like, yes, it's incredible, it's genius, I'm so glad I read it. I'm like, what did you like about it? And then he told me he was 16 when he read it, so yeah. The book that I read after that was The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. It's quite a famous book, and I get that it has good lessons, I guess, but it was so obvious. And it's just, the story is that there's this prophet that comes to a land and he gives people lessons, and people ask him about like certain topics, and then he gives his advice in a couple passages. It's really short. It's like 120 pages or something, but it dragged out so much for me because it was so slow paced. I didn't enjoy it at all, and it took me like days and days and days to finish it, just the 120 pages. So I gave it 2 stars. 2 stars just because it wasn't garbage. I could see the value in it, but it's just not my style. Okay, we're at the 20th mark. The 20th book that I finished was Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Remember how I told you that I'm usually quite careful with my books? This is a second-hand book for me. That's why it's in this rough of a shape. This is a non-fiction book. It's about this woman's journey. It's about her journey after she has like a nervous breakdown, and she goes through a divorce and her life is falling apart, but she still has her career, and she's like, I'm just gonna travel for a year and see what happens. So she goes to Italy and then India and then Bali for 4 months each. It's about the story of what she learns, and this is the type of nonfiction that I actually like. It was quite educational in the spiritual sense, and it was also quite funny. And one of my favorite things about it is that the chapters are really bite-sized. Most of them are like just 2 pages, some of them are 1 page. I don't think there was a chapter that was longer than 10 pages. So I really liked that aspect about it. It really made it fast-paced. And I have all these, what are they called? I really can't remember what these are called, but I've just highlighted the places that I really liked and that resonated with me, and I thought that they were good lessons. I really recommend this, but especially to women. I'm not quite sure how many men would like this, but I'm pretty sure a lot of women would appreciate it. I mean, just because the writer is a woman. Okay, we're at the last one. Last book that I read for 2021, the 21st book, is The Christmas Pig by J.K. Rowling, and I was seeing this book everywhere. I even saw it at a book fair in Baku, which we don't get new releases almost ever. I was really intrigued. I saw that it was a Christmas time book, and I love Christmas themed stuff. It's about this little boy who has a stuffed animal in the shape of a pig, and he considers this toy his best friend, and one day he loses it and his adventures begin. It's quite a cute book. It's children's fantasy, and yeah, it was really nice. I listened to this on audiobook as well, which was like a whole production. It sounded like a movie. It just lacks the animation and that's it. And I enjoyed listening to it while it was snowing here. And yeah, it was quite a cute book. I think most children would enjoy it, and I gave it 4 stars. And that wraps up all of the books that I read in 2021. Imagine this video if I had read like 50 or 100 books. Damn. You know how you can set reading challenges for the year on Goodreads? I think I am going to set it at 40, just because I really want to get more into reading this year. And also some of my goals are that I want to read bigger books that I used to be intimidated by. There are a few books that I was always like, oh my god, it's so long. How am I going to get through it? I'm gonna get bored of it, and then I'm not going to not finish it. So, and then that will make me not read other books that I could have been reading. It's just a whole self-sabotage up in here. I think I was traumatized one time when I was in school. I was reading For Whom the Bell Tolls by Ernest Hemingway. It was such a mistake. I hate that book so much. It was so long. It was like, I mean, for me at that time, it was really long. I think I must have been 14. It was almost 600 pages, I think. I read the translated version as well, and it was so slow paced. It was so boring. And at the time I had a rule that I would never not finish a book that I started, and because I had started it, I would make myself read it and read it and read it until I was done, and I wasn't allowed to read other books while I was reading it. It was such a mess. I don't know why I did it to myself. It took me like 9 months to read the whole thing. Can you imagine? I wasted 9 months on one book that I hated. Oh, it's just ridiculous to me now. Yeah, after that happened, I was like, screw this rule. I'm going to read whatever the fuck I want. So ever since, I've been reading like 10 books at the same time. So so yeah, I was quite intimidated by long books for a while, but I think Donna Tartt fixed it for me, because The Secret History is, I think, almost 600 pages as well, and The Goldfinch is like almost 800 pages. So I'm not scared of long books anymore. They can be good. Yeah, so I don't really have like a set TBR. I do have a TBR shelf on Goodreads, but I don't have like a set schedule of which one I want to read first or second. I would really like to hit the goal of 40 books. Oh, I forgot. I didn't read 21 books. I read another one towards the end of the year. So I read 22 books. It's just that that book isn't on Goodreads, so that's why I couldn't log it in. It's actually a book that one of my acquaintances wrote. It's called Chayki nad Caspian. It's in Russian, and it's about people in their early 20s in Baku, and it's such a cute love story. It has traditions, and you get sceneries of Baku, which are very beautiful, and there are great family dynamics, friendships, and it was great. And I was so proud of Narmin for writing this. Her writing pseudonym is Nana. I mean, it's not a pseudonym, we all call her Nana, but yeah, it was a blast. So yeah, I read 22 books. It was an okay year. Yeah, and I hope that 2022 will be better. And there are also a couple of books that I'm currently reading. I think I will tell you what they are. The first one is If We Were Villains. It's another dark academia recommendation. I think this is the second favorite of a lot of people who love The Secret History. And I agree that it's much better than all of the other dark academia books that I've read other than The Secret History. But again, it doesn't really top The Secret History for me. I'm pretty much at the end, but I still have like 3 chapters left, I think. So maybe there will be such a good twist that I'm going to take this back. I don't know. I'm actually reading it with one of my friends, so we're like discussing it along the way, and it's really fun. Another book that I'm reading right now is Crazy Rich Asians. I'm really enjoying it. It's really fun, but I'm only like 30% of the way through. And it's quite a good lighthearted break for me from other dark things that I'm reading. I'm usually more into complicated plots and fantasy and dark topics, so it's quite a good buffer, but it's also quite well written, and also it's really interesting in the sense that I never knew like some traditions that Southeast Asians had, and it's mostly about that. I'm quite enjoying it, and I hope that it's as good as it's been throughout the end, and I hope the other two books in the trilogy are good as well. So yeah, I think that's it. I am so tired of talking. I'm usually not a talker. I don't talk like at all. If someone doesn't talk to me throughout the day, I will not say anything to anyone. So this is a lot for me. That's why I have this wine with me in a champagne glass. I don't know why. Thank you for watching. Please tell me what you read last year. Tell me what your favorite books were from last year and what you're planning to read this year. I would really love to hear that. I mean, if you're interested. And yeah, thank you so much, and see you next time.